The man just wanted to enjoy the view outside the plane, but suddenly saw a woman standing outside the window. At first he thought it was just a hallucination, so he subconsciously leaned in for a closer look. Sure enough, there really was a woman in the dark clouds. Before he could react, she started waving at him. This impossible scene made his hair stand on end. To verify if all of this was actually real, he pressed against the window to see clearly. However, in the next second, this instantly scared the man out of his wits. His utterly terrified and pathetic state drew the attention of other passengers. Hearing the commotion, the flight attendant quickly came over, asking what was wrong. The man explained a woman was floating outside the window, but everyone thought he was just spouting nonsense. How could a human possibly appear at 10,000 meters in the sky? As she spoke, she requested that he return to his seat. With the flight attendant's constant reassurance, the man slowly began to regain his composure, and he also started to feel that his own claims were far too ridiculous. But the scene from just a moment ago had been so terrifying that, overwhelmed by shock, he decided he had to go to the restroom to calm himself down. However, the very moment he stepped inside the bathroom, the eerie woman from outside the window suddenly flashed into the mirror, and the man, having experienced these strange events, was already scared out of his wits, shouting that he needed to get off the plane immediately, and insisting there was something evil on board. His words at the same time made the surrounding passengers increasingly agitated and uneasy, because ever since the plane took off, the good weather had suddenly turned terrible, with lightning overhead chasing their flight. As the man grew more agitated, to prevent panic, the air marshal immediately stepped in to restrain him. Even so, the man still insisted there were unclean things on the plane and desperately wanted to get off, but the crew thought he was crazy and without a word brought a bottle of sedatives and shoved them into his mouth. As the medication took effect, the man finally quieted down. Everyone thought the fuss was over, but what they didn't know was that strange things would follow from that moment on. Very soon, the two pilots detected something quite abnormal. The aircraft should have easily escaped the storm zone within 30 minutes, but this particular thunderstorm, like a stubborn adhesive, persistently encircled their flight. Helpless, the two pilots could only stare intently ahead, fearing any unknown dangers. Meanwhile, it was already mealtime in the passenger cabin. Then, a female passenger asked a flight attendant for a salad. Receiving it, she eagerly began to enjoy her meal. But as soon as she took a bite, her stomach began to churn, making her feel an immediate and intense urge to vomit. What she spat out, however, left everyone there completely stunned. It turned out that what she had just eaten wasn't a salad at all, but a box full of wriggling maggots. Seeing this, the flight attendant grabbed a towel to clean the floor, and sensing trouble, she signaled her colleague to check the rest of the food in the storage room. But when the colleague opened it, he was horrified to find all the food was full of maggots, which instantly sent shivers down his spine. Left with no choice, he had to throw away all the salads. After doing all this, he immediately contacted the captain in the cockpit and reported the strange situation in the cabin to him in detail. But no sooner had he hung up than a sudden lightning bolt struck the fuselage, plunging the cabin into instant darkness, and the plane began to fall uncontrollably. In an instant, the cabin was filled with cries of despair. In the cockpit, both pilots immediately checked their equipment, only to find that every instrument had failed and the engines had stalled from a malfunction. Now, their only remaining hope was to manually pull up the nose of the plane. The captain forced himself to stay calm, straining against the control column with all of his strength. Finally, with the co-pilot's help, he successfully leveled the nose back to the horizon, and the aircraft temporarily returned to a steady flight. Everyone narrowly escaped the plane crash. However, after the violent turbulence, a female passenger's nose was accidentally hit and started bleeding, so she quickly went into the restroom to clean the blood. But just as she closed the toilet door, the flight attendant saw a ghostly face outside the window, but the next second that face disappeared. Little did she know, she wasn't the only one who saw the ghostly face. At this moment, a bald passenger also looked through the porthole glass and witnessed a strange woman floating outside the window. This chilling scene immediately scared him into putting down the window's sunshade, thinking out of sight, out of mind, trying to dispel his inner fear this way. Meanwhile, the female passenger cleaning nosebleeds in the restroom also encountered something extremely bizarre. First, a baby's cry inexplicably echoed around her. Then the lights above her head flickered non-stop. Immediately after, she noticed her reflection in the mirror had a strange cut on her neck. She instinctively checked her body, but found herself completely unharmed. This unbelievable scene instantly terrified her, making her desperate to escape the restroom, but the door was firmly locked, impossible to open. Before she could even react, a large hand pulled her into another space, forcing herself to open her eyes. Enduring the fear, she found herself in an airplane's cargo hold. The next second, a figure flashed past, scaring her into quickly closing her eyes. But when she opened her eyes again, she found herself back in the restroom. Then, a woman holding a child appeared in the mirror, seemingly trying to tell her something, but she couldn't hear what was being said. After hearing screams from inside, the crew immediately pried open the restroom door, only to find the woman slumped on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. A flight attendant then had to help her back to her seat. After she had somewhat recovered, the woman recounted the strange incident, but the air marshal dismissed it as nonsense.
But these strange events made the atmosphere gradually tense.
The atmosphere around them grew increasingly eerie. Some passengers believed there was something unclean on the plane, while others thought it was just hallucinations from being overly scared. But as they argued, they completely missed two large words, murder, appearing on the nearby glass. Before anyone could even breathe a sigh of relief, the girl listening to music encountered something terrifying, suddenly hearing a cry for help from her headphones. Initially, she thought it was her boyfriend's voice, but her boyfriend looked completely confused after hearing it. Seeing this, Hey May just assumed she was hallucinating, but when she put on her headphones to listen to music again, that eerie sound rang out once more. This instantly bewildered Hai Mei. It seemed someone was calling for help. To check if she was hallucinating, she quickly put the headphones in her boyfriend's ear, but her boyfriend still heard nothing, and comforted her, saying the headphones might be faulty. Hai Mei, disbelieving, put the headphones on again, but then, the next second, but her boyfriend looked completely innocent. Yet when she looks down, she was horrified to find the headphones covered in blood. This bizarre sound had actually caused her ears to bleed uncontrollably. Terrified, the girl hid the headphones away and never dared to listen again. But just as she tried to calm herself down, something eerie happened once more. It seemed as if Hai Mei had been possessed by something. She suddenly stood up from her seat and walked toward the bathroom with a blank expression, and she didn't snap out of it until she was standing right in front of the bathroom mirror. When Hai Mei returned to her seat, she told her boyfriend about the strange things she'd encountered. She believed there was something unclean on the plane, but as she spoke, Hai Mei again fell into a dazed state, and then suddenly opened the overhead compartment. The very next second, Hai Mei instantly collapsed to the floor, terrified. When she finally came to, she had already been pulled by some force into the plane's cargo hold. In front of her stood a woman with vacant eyes, cradling a wailing infant. But the woman didn't harm Hai Mei. Instead, she kept repeating a single phrase. Hai Mei, who was sent back, was so terrified she burst into tears. After she calmed down a bit, she recounted what she'd seen, but no one believed her absurd story. Meanwhile, these strange and successive incidents made the cabin atmosphere gradually tense. Everyone began to discuss the truth behind it all. Just as they were heatedly analyzing, a male passenger in the front row fearfully spotted a pale hand gripping the restroom door. The very next second, that eerie woman appeared right before their eyes. This incredibly terrifying scene instantly left everyone breathless, completely shattering their understanding. Before anyone could react, the woman suddenly pointed her finger at something and let out a piercing, blood-curdling scream. This startled the air marshal, who immediately drew his pistol, but before he could even fire, the figure vanished without a trace, like a cloud of smoke. The terrified flight attendant rushed into the cockpit to tell the captain the plane was haunted, hoping he could make an emergency landing. Otherwise, everyone's lives would be in grave danger. But the captain stated he was powerless, because the plane was currently flying high above the Pacific Ocean, with absolutely no place to land. No sooner had he finished speaking than the co-pilot beside him, as if possessed, suddenly began to bulge with veins, his face becoming hideous, and then he immediately grabbed the captain's neck. The aircraft then spiraled out of control. Items from the overhead bins tumbled down, and the screams from the passenger cabin were incessant. The air marshal, sensing trouble, quickly rushed into the cockpit, stopping the crazed co-pilot. Only then could the captain break free, successfully stabilizing the out-of-control plane, thus preventing the tragedy. Meanwhile, passengers in the cabin noticed the words "murder" mysteriously appearing on the window glass. The passengers, already terrified by the ghost, instantly trembled with fear at this sight. Based on the ghost's hints, everyone vaguely suspected their appearance was linked to someone on the plane, who must be a perverted serial killer, thus attracting their revenge. To avoid being affected, the passengers unanimously decided to find the killer the ghost spoke of. Then the black girl suddenly remembered being pulled into the cargo hold by the culprit, realizing the secret might be hidden there. Thinking this, they immediately sprang into action. Led by the air police, the large group marched into the cargo hold to search for clues. But as they descended, ghostly figures began to appear all around them, and from the corner, a baby's cry echoed, seemingly guiding their path. The next moment, they spotted a bloody umbilical cord on the floor, and at the end of the cord was a handbag. Hesitantly, they unzipped it, but what was inside instantly sent shivers down everyone's spine. Passengers on the plane discovered something horrifying. In a carry-on bag in the cargo hold, there were photos of brutally murdered women, and one of the murdered women was the very ghost they had seen earlier. What's more, it was also filled with the victim's jewelry and hair, very much like... and also, human hair. It was quite clear the backpack's owner was a complete, depraved killer. Soon after, they discovered the captain's business card inside, and all clues immediately pointed to this aircraft's captain. Meanwhile, the unaware captain was still piloting the plane. For everyone's safety and to confirm the captain's actions, the air marshal immediately threw the evidence before him. But despite the overwhelming evidence, the captain still feigned composure, claiming ignorance, and said they'd conduct a detailed investigation after landing. It was clear the captain, aware his secret was out, planned to use this to stall for time and find an escape. But the air marshal wasn't easily fooled. Seeing the captain offered no truth, he instinctively drew his pistol to intimidate him. The captain instantly panicked at the sight, and seeing there was no way out, to avoid spending his life in prison, the furious captain violently shook the controls, intending to drag everyone down with him to their deaths. The very next second, the out-of-control plane plunged straight down towards the vast Pacific Ocean. The sudden violent turbulence terrified all the passengers on board, but the captain's utterly heinous act also enraged the souls of the victims, who immediately possessed a passenger and directly strangled the captain's neck. With everyone pulling together, they successfully dragged the captain from the pilot's seat. The co-pilot, seeing this, quickly took over. With his fierce, expert handling, he finally stabilized the runaway plane, and the captain was restrained by the air marshal. Just as everyone thought the crisis was over, the plane was struck by lightning, and the fuselage shook violently once more, and the captain seized the chance to break free. But then, the woman he'd brutally murdered, holding a baby, slowly began to approach him. The captain, witnessing this horrific scene, instantly turned deathly pale, stumbling backward. But at that moment he had absolutely nowhere to escape, as countless victims had completely surrounded him, each one with a terrifying, distorted expression on their faces. Under the immense pressure of extreme fear, the captain had no choice but to reveal the truth behind it all. It turned out that deep within him, he harbored a twisted, perverted fetish. He loved watching the expressions of lives struggling in their final moments. As time passed, his twisted mind worsened. He often dated women, secretly torturing and killing them, not even sparing pregnant ones. To escape police, he used his pilot identity to travel the world. But despite his schemes, he never imagined his victims would become vengeful ghosts, coming 10,000 meters high to exact revenge. The captain begged the spirits to spare him, swearing he'd learn from his mistakes and live a good life. But there's no medicine for regret in this world. The sins he committed must be repaid. Before the captain could react, his right hand uncontrollably grabbed the pistol, aiming it directly at his own head. With a gunshot, the captain collapsed, and his soul quickly detached from his body. Looking at his lifeless form, the captain realized he was dead, and an endless torment awaited him. But the crisis wasn't over. The plane, struck by lightning, was completely out of control. Seeing the plane about to crash, the co-pilot desperately pulled the controls, urging all passengers to fasten their seatbelts, leaving the rest to destiny. Unexpectedly, after a burst of sparks and lightning, the plane crashed through the terminal, successfully completing its landing. Ultimately, everyone survived unharmed, except for the utterly wicked captain. This film teaches us that good and evil are always repaid. All wickedness ultimately leads to ruin, and the movie concludes.